December 2nd, select board meeting. It is 5:30. Our first order of business are the select board minutes from November the 18th. Would our motion to accept those? I'll make a motion to accept the minutes. There's a second. Thank you. Any discussion? It's just something I just made that noise myself. Okay, any other changes, traces, all in favor, say aye. On to the warrants, the accounts payable for the day. Motion to accept the payables through 12. I'll second. Thank you, Trace. Any discussion? You good? Sorry, we're good. There was a comment on that. There was an echo. We're trying to fix it. A couple of easy questions. Looks like David Hall uses Canon for weeklies. Aren't doing a copy. Library uses Is that? So is that going on one contract?
We could investigate it. I don't know if we have a contract for a one time for copy service. For the copy of your office, 3 years. 3 years.
Our contract.
So we can get like in March, seeing if we can bring the library into the family, or if there's a way to. Yeah.
What years ago, on the track was one copies this is library. But he did do we have to buy chains every year?
We currently buy chains every year for trucks. I think that is a long-standing practice. It's something to be investigated further whether or not we need to be spending that much money a year on chains. So whether we could get there for 2 years.
And there are a lot of different credits and that
Right. But we're all, yeah.
Okay. And why are we doing water tests in December?
For N9?
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's something to change for scrap.
I found one Mola Road, but I'm not picking it up much to do. Is Martinsville High Road not built for scrap? Is it not consistent? Because it looks like everything's going to be remade.
They don't do it monthly. They usually do. There's no water on them.
But that's just a correction. John, the payment to rivers were
So they essentially were our project manager for that project.
Okay. It was just a late.
It was late. Exactly. It was late and missed the payable last month. So here now.
All in favor, say aye. Motion passes. I have one adjustment to the agenda. We need an executive session with our panel request to discuss. Are there any other adjustments that we need to do?
No adjustments to the agenda, but this is still trying to figure out the echo issue.
It's not an issue. I gotta figure it out. So, keep going.
Okay, are there any public comments? Yes.
Chair Clark, was that committee report found regarding switching, transition, the traffic coordination with us?
It was not.
Okay. So my question is, where do these committee reports get filed? We're not filing. It is mine. The policies, future business board, communities, commission, here, the set, talks about committee board, charge. I follow saying. But when the report gets to the board, the members go up.
How long ago was it?
7 years ago. Where is it? Hartland Safety and Policing. Where is responsibility for that? For reference.
But I think the CCTV report is on the website. It's also exists on the town, in the class. We have a copy of things that have been done in the last, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years. We have a firm record of. Prior to that, I can't speak to it.
What's public record law? Is it 6 years or something?
I think that sounds accurate. Okay, but I don't know about that. And that's sort of you have to keep it readily available. Yeah.
We're acutely aware that in the past it's been a little looseness as far as saving our records. And we're trying to address that with both committee reports as well as past contracts. John has been in charge of turning that around so that they actually know where the documents are. So we'll say within the last 4 years or so, or 5 years, we have a better handle on them because they're backed up electronically.
I'm pretty confident that we did that before. My is specific policies to be filed. Because we found out this is all fine. I'm like, looking fine process that we'll bring it down.
Not on the clerk's office? It's not on the clerk's office? Was there
Well, that's me, a past assistant found bits and pieces, past manager found bits and pieces, what was important, manager found a map of the planning and stuff, that's
I'm sorry.
anybody at that time?
We did not ask previous employees of the town. No.
So if you're looking for the survey, that's on Fox.
Survey.
The survey.
We want.
The survey.
This is the plan that the committee presented. Ready?
John, they scan some of that stuff. You know, so where is the scan? It was really
Exactly.
So it's just a matter of, like, for instance, I came in and wanted to, so I went to put it in this, in the office, that I can look at. That's how it is now.
I will continue to follow up because we ran into a bit of a jam within the last year, where we could find documents, so we're making an effort to turn that around. Other comments? Anything online?
Well, so we're still having some real feedback issues online. It sounds like,
Yeah.
is there benefit to the individual, restart?
Yeah.
Solution?
Yeah, that fixes everything very often. I wish I was joking.
Yeah, next to that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think unless there's a.
One place is to move to now. Because it has water, everyone's afraid of the fires. Buffalo.
Right. I mean, this is
Fully willing to do that.
5 minutes. And the meeting resumes, correct?
Pretty much, do that, simply just unplug this, plug that back in, but I don't think that will work. Yep.
Just so everybody's clear online, we're just trying to fix the echo, so give us a few minutes, we'll work on it.
Technology, understood, we still the old fashioned way. We're gonna reboot the meeting, so we may need to log back in. You already? Nope. Was Moving on to old business. We have, as people know, we commissioned a study of an engineering study of the Hartland Quechee Road, which we received a report in August of this year. It has it was quite thorough and has a very steep price tag. We have some other interim looks, but this evening we have Scott Williams from Pathways Consulting, who did the initial report with us. And John, do you want to introduce the topic?
Sure. So Pathways was hired by the town to do an assessment of the Quechee Road, provided us a report back in the summer. They had done geotechnical borings up and down the road and given us a path forward. With that information, we also asked another engineer, Everett Hammond, to take a look at it, to digest it, to provide us feedback. So we have the information from Pathways, we have the information from Everett. Scott has been willing to take a look at what Everett also provided and come and chat with us tonight to provide us, what is the most financially feasible option to get the Quechee Road, at least the worst sections of it, into a passable form. Recognizing that the $6.4, I believe, million price tag that was the full rebuild and replace was not a real feasible option at this time. So with that, Scott.
Yes, good evening, and appreciate you letting me participate this evening. Did all of you on the board have an opportunity to look at Everett's comments that he provided?
We did briefly look at it. Yes.
Yes.
So, obviously the different options that we provided, we didn't get into a lot of detail about, doing specific measures for specific areas. We tried to give a broad brush idea of what the cost would be to handle the various areas that are in, a wide range of conditions. One of the points that Everett made is some of the areas on the current roadway appear to be in good condition, but they've been fairly recently overlaid within the past couple years. So they appear to be better, but they also might have the same, subsurface deficiencies underneath it that the worst sections, based on current condition show. And they could actually end up in that condition in the near future. Although I agree with that, the overlay work that's been done, seems to be holding up pretty well. So I think that's bought you some time in those areas, one way or the other.
But Scott, can I just ask a question there? So some sections have sunk significantly, right?
Yes.
Right. And I don't think they're really options, right? They're really classifications that you guys presented. Like 1 is the least problematic and 4 is the worst problematic, right?
Yes.
And if the 1s and 2s, whether they've had a recent overlay or not, an overlay was not going to fix any structural issues. So is it reasonable to assume that if the 1s and 2s haven't already sunk significantly, that they're not going to sink unless there's some kind of significant weather event?
I don't know that I could say that is a completely accurate assumption for this. We did notice in the worst areas, there were obviously problems in the ditch lines on both sides, drainage issues, slope issues adjacent to some of those areas. So those were obvious. And, that was basically, 3,000 feet of the whole 32,000 feet of road. So a very small percentage of the overall amount. Everything else ranged from areas that had just been overlaid, so they weren't showing any issues, to, more significant issues and a lot of delamination and parts of it where long stretches were not in great shape. but hadn't started to completely fail. And so the reason I am hesitant to say that, the areas that appear to be in fairly good shape now aren't going to have significant problems in the future is that we just don't know what's underneath there. Had we looked at this a couple years ago and then looked at it again this past summer, we would have a better feel for that. But I just haven't had any history with the road at all.
Right.
So,
is it a reasonable approach though, or, I'm not sure if we know what the best approach is. Maybe you're going to tell us that at the end. But we do the 3s and the 4s because we know there's significant structural issues there. And then it's going to take us 2 or 3 years to get that work done by the time we bond for it, fix the drainage stuff, and get the road surface fixed. Sure. At that point, you know if the 1s and 2s are going to hold up, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement to say. And this is what I noticed of all of the things that we've considered. A lot of Everett's approach, which is very valid, was to try to preserve the road and buy time down the road. But that assumes that you can afford the bigger nut later on, which is much more significant, roadway replacement for a much larger area. And I don't think that's something that the town is really prepared for a few years down the road.
Right.
So
we're basically delaying the inevitable.
Yep. I mean, putting money into a lot of expensive preservation over the entire length of the road is great to buy time, knowing that eventually you're going to have to do a lot more. But doing a full depth replacement in the worst areas will essentially take those areas out of the mix in the future and make them only really need to have some lesser treatments and longer term maintenance. So to me, if you have a limited budget, what I would focus the most attention on is the worst sections of the road, and trying to repair those, because those you're just going to continue to, it's like a sinking boat that you're just going to keep dumping money into, and it keeps sinking and you're putting more money into it over and over. And I think I've seen that already with some of those worst sections that have 6, 8, 10 inches of pavement on them. Each one of those layers that's been put on there to try to get it passable are just to buy time, for that to happen again.
Right.
And so, to me, like, one of the things the study really showed us is that there's a lot of ditch work and drainage work along the roadside and shoulder and the slopes next to the road that should be done one way or the other in as much of the road length as possible. So John and I talked about the potential for that to be part of the budget going forward, regardless of what needs to happen on the pavement side of things, within the travel way. So, that I think is something that you should consider, and whether that's done through a bond or strictly through, your highway department and getting some of those things done and just chipping away at it. That's something that I think is money well spent. Because that was a major part of where we saw, the worst sections of pavement were also in the worst sections of drainage issues and lack of ditches, culverts that are not functioning the way they should. So that to me is as much preventative as it is slapping down a chip and seal, coat on pavement to try to buy a few years. So to me, I agreed with, Everett's options that he laid out, but I don't think it is worth spending money to just preserve, temporarily preserve the entire length of the road if you're not going to address some of the worst sections, and try to upgrade them so that you don't have to continue to do that in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think Phil had a question.
Well, you partially answered it. Scott, I don't want to get you off track because what John asked you to do is what you're doing now to give some comments on and ultimately some suggestions about how to approach this short of the 6.4 million. That's laid out very nicely in your report. Everett talks, Mr. Hammond talks a little bit about, starting in one direction, coming south. He also talks about changing the depth from 18 to 24 inches. He talks about using different substrata from a different quarry. Are all these pieces just smaller pieces to the greater puzzle, or are these engineering important aspects that we should be considering at this time?
Adding another 6 inches of crushed stone is going to add, 10% to the cost of a full depth reconstruction. But that's the only option it affects. So if you're only going to reconstruct a small area, I agree with Everett. We should make that bulletproof and try to at least meet the standard for this type of road for those areas. And that will definitely provide some longevity and allow you to only have to do some minimal maintenance in the future. So
What are you saying? You're saying 6 inches in addition to
the 18. So
yeah, so we basically costed out 18 inches of crushed stone underneath the roads, and that's what we priced it on.
Right, but you must have done that based on some engineering math, right?
Yeah, and that's also based on, rural highways in Vermont and what the typical standards are. When you get to 24 inches, you're closer to, their highways, are definitely, and interstates are going to have at least that and some. But again, I think if you are, that becomes a little, design thing, that if you were looking at a specific stretch of roadway and you're trying to value engineer it to get the most out of your money, that's a decision that could be made at that time that doesn't have a huge additional cost associated with it. And what engineers would look at for a reconstruction is, they could consider putting a layer of fabric down, which also, engineers typically will say that a layer of fabric will basically be equivalent to roughly 6 inches of crushed stone. So if you use what we already priced with the contingencies and all the other things that are buried in those costs, I don't think our reconstruction costs are that far off in terms of going to 24 inches of crushed stone instead of 18 inches. But I certainly agree with the merits of doing that, and it buys you longevity in the future, and it lowers the risk that you're going to have to put much money into that section of the road.
Using the 10% number, in the proposal that we got from Pathways back in the summer, if we add the total length of the road together, we're talking about adding about $100,000 to the total price to do the section, the orange and red sections, the 2.5 miles of road that are identified as poor to really bad.
Right.
So, and that price tag is just over $4 million. So $100,000 on top of that is not insignificant, but if it buys us significantly longer life out of the road, which is what we're being told.
Yes.
So.
And the other thing that a lot of our reconstruction costs that we put in the study, those also had a lot of extra stuff like drainage, under drain, ditching, and that sort of thing. So, and that's done when you're reconstructing as opposed to just overlaying, preserving, or doing something less than that. We include those costs in the reconstruction because that can all be done at the same time. But if you're just boxing out, edge of road in on both sides, and you've already done some of the ditch work, that you could basically take that part of the cost out of it. So, that's another way to look at it, is those are just, minor sort of design features that we would look at section by section to figure out what makes the most sense.
Okay, that's where I was going with my question, rather than make it carte blanche for the whole 6 miles. I am concerned about vehicle safety. Some of the ruts at this point are deep enough so that your car can get thrown very easily, especially in winter weather, from side to side, and all of a sudden you'll be going down the road sideways. As we look at I'm not quite sure how to justify looking at ditching in preparation for more aggressive paving, or just do section by section, ditching and paving, as well as the full box cut and the whole 9 yards. Do you have any, what ultimately, you said you've spoken to John about the idea of proceeding with ditching. Is there another option we might be thinking about?
Well, obviously, if there was a section that you were going to reconstruct, you could ask a contractor to include that in that, pavement reconstruction work. Outside of that, I mean, I could tell you this, there are a lot of sections where, I think the pavement is failing, and it's directly related to plugged culverts. So if you've got a plugged culvert that doesn't flow and water is literally ponding in the ditch next to it, that's causing major damage to those sections of roads. And we saw a lot of correlation between where the ditching and the drainage was not functioning correctly to the areas that were failing. Especially the worst case, particularly the severe sections where you've got a steep slope on one side that is literally failing and the pavement is sinking on that side. So from the center line to the, edge of pavement, instead of being, a 2% grade, it's a 10% cross grade because the pavement's sunk. And then you go to the opposite side of that road and there is no ditch, and there's ponding water on that side.
Well, and Scott, our problem is one of those areas where that's happening, you go to the other side of the road and there's bedrock.
Right.
And there's just ledge coming right out to the edge of the road. So I'm not surprised there's not a ditch on those places. Just north of Gilson is where I'm talking about right now.
Jim,
Your numbers do not include your cost estimates?
We included some of that, particularly in the full box section and the reclaimed stabilized base. So options 3 and 4.
So ditching is part of those numbers already.
right. So if we start the work, there's cost savings to be found by the town, by the road crew doing that ditch work.
Yes.
And those culvert replacements.
And or you contract that out and have the road crew do sections 1 and 2.
Correct. There's options here. One of the reasons that having Scott come is that, we've had this report now for a few months. We got feedback from Everett. Scott has reviewed Everett's work or suggestions as well. But as town meeting approaches, there needs to be, we need to make a decision about whether or not, we want to take any action on this. Because, when Scott and I were talking, it sounds like even if we took out a bond, we're not potentially still not talking construction this construction season, given the size of the project. But, we're talking summer 2026.
John, if I may just correct you for the challenge that we're facing, it's not, we'll need to do something
Yes.
for town meeting, whether it's likely not to be the full-blown 6 point something million.
Right.
But what is it that we can begin to digest?
Correct.
As well as have the town understand this is our long-range approach.
Right. Agreed.
But we need to do that. It's part of why Scott's here this evening. And okay. Other questions for Scott at this point? I mean,
just one small question. Scott, you had mentioned the fabric solution, right? In terms of cost, yeah, what's cheaper, fabric or an extra 6 inches of crushed stone?
I would say with inflation over the past couple of years, probably the crushed stone.
So even with the labor to bring all that stone.
Yeah, I mean, the reason it was a viable option, you know, it typically is, you know, that the fabric was relatively cheap. The fact that you've got quarries in the area, you know, what has increased in terms of costs related to that is trucking, price of, you know, gas, and the transportation part of it. So who knows what's going to happen in 2 years from now. But petroleum-based fabric materials are probably not going to come down a great deal. And they're not certainly going to be subject to any local economics, you know, that gravels and crushed stone materials are. So, but again, that's kind of, you know, what we would typically do is if we knew what the bond amount was, we would try to, you know, maximize that and then look at, you know, some different cost estimates for various options and then figure out what fits. And that's the easiest way to do it. So that's why I say that's kind of like the decision about fabric versus an extra 6 inches of material is just something that, you know, we would want to try to value engineer once we knew what, you know, area we're really talking and where it is.
That's good. Trace, thoughts? I know this is.
I have some thoughts, but I will share them later. So,
Are they for public comment or what?
Well, so you were saying that the ledge comes down to meet the road.
Yeah.
There are places, I know there's driveways that come off the road, but there are places that you can simply raise the road with crushed stone, take the tar off, compact the ground, raise it with fresh crushed stone, because now you have a new base, and you'll be getting a swale along the side of the road if you're elevating it 18 inches anyway.
Yeah.
So, and you could
I agree. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I actually used that on a project that I was doing up in the dark area where there was water coming into a building, and we actually created a swale with the road.
Right.
So that it didn't.
What you do is you'd save money on putting the swale in because it's going to be created by elevating the road.
Right.
So it's possible, but not every place.
Last in driveways or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Clyde, thoughts?
I think you covered everything.
Okay.
Just how much of a bullet are we going to bite?
Nicely said. Scott, I appreciate you working with John and taking the time this evening. I think we'll be working with you as we go forward and making some partial decisions on how to we actually on this whole project that needs to get addressed. John, any other thoughts?
No. Scott, thank you again for talking us through it a little bit more.
No problem. Well, thanks for having me, and good luck, and certainly let us know if you have more questions.
It's a tough one.
We will. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay. Moving on to new business, we have a lister's errors and omissions report in our packet. We have a multi-page document. I'm just hoping we can blitz through this and answer any questions. Do we have a lister on?
Stacy is on.
Okay.
Stacy, do you want to walk?
Yep,
Everybody
I'm here.
Yep.
Okay. Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. So yes, this is pretty straightforward. The Board of Listers is simply doing its due diligence, kind of closing out the year end of the 2024 grand list. This document you have lists all the changes that have occurred to the grand list since we lodged the as-build in July. Most of them did not require prior select board approval because they're based on changes of allocation due to homestead declaration, or because the state finally certified current use applications on our current use parcels. There were the 4. I did put in the 4 changes that you guys approved back in September, the errors and omissions, just to have a comprehensive document. So this is just to let the select board know of these changes, and basically ask that, you signing off on it is sort of an approval. It's really more of a saying you've received it, you've looked at it, and then this document gets attached to the copy of the grand list that the town clerk has in his vault.
Stacy, does it change tax collections in any way?
Anything that did change any tax collection, the tax bill's already been revised and sent out. So as the homestead declarations came in and somebody was moved from being, they filed a homestead declaration, that allocation already got changed from non-homestead to homestead. So it's already been.
It's a little different, but is it going to impact the revenue that the town receives in taxes?
No, only the 4 that you guys already approved, the 2 veterans exemptions, and then the parcel that was made contiguous and merged into the other parcel, but that's already been taken care of and adjusted. Overall, no, this does not change the bottom line as far as what our grand list is or what the revenue's coming in for the town.
Great, thanks.
Do we have any other current use outstanding sort of things that are not resolved with the state right now?
They are all resolved with the state. I did finally receive the final verification of that from our state current use specialist, Caitlin Emerson. She emailed me today, and all our current use parcels are certified on their end, verified on our side, completed, done, finished for the year.
Great. Okay, Stacy, we're signing the document now, so unless there's any other questions, I think, thank you for getting this done and submitted.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Moving on, we have 2 budget discussions tonight. As hopefully the audience knows and people know that we've been looking at the budget with a projected in the next meeting or so to finalize it for town meeting. At the last meeting, we had the highway department foreman here, and tonight we have our esteemed librarian and our outstanding rec center. Is that good for interest? Okay. So John, do you want to launch us on the library budget? We have
Sure.
We have multiple pages in front of us, and
Multiple pages in front of you. So Tracy's here to talk you through the budget. So the budget you have for the library, I'm gonna tell you will change because there's been some staffing changes. I think Tracy will talk about that a little bit. But Tracy, if you want to walk the board through the budget.
Sure. So in front of you, you have a proposal from September that we worked on, totaling 370.
So, hold on just a second, Tracy.
Are we starting at the bottom of page 10?
Yes. So the page numbers are on the bottom right in tiny print.
They are?
Yep, they are.
What were they? Okay, are we there? Everyone? Okay.
He's got the copy.
Okay. Tracy, we're back with you.
Okay. The total at the bottom is $307,440.52. We
Just real quick, it's slightly different. The budget we have in front of us is 307,753.
okay.
A few $100. We'll figure.
It's going to change. The changes that we are proposing do need to be voted on by the Board of Trustees, so we do not have a physical copy to share with you right now. The board will hopefully be meeting for an emergency meeting on Tuesday, December 10th, and we'll have an actual budget prepared by the 16th. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. The reason being is because we had a staff person leave, and just 2 weeks ago, we haven't really had enough time to reconfigure everything, vote on it, and present it to you tonight. So
You just used an important word. Is it reconfiguring the 307, or do you expect to come back at 407?
Oh, no, it will be less. Let me just finish real quick.
Okay.
So, I mean, this might be the shortest presentation ever.
Okay.
So basically we are going to come in around 291 if it is voted on, which is less than the 3077 that you see.
Also important to note, less than the approved budget for the library from last year.
Exactly.
So are you reducing headcount or?
Well, we're reducing a staff person that is currently getting insurance. So, and we're making some adjustments around that with some additional hours to current staff, and then some a part-time staff coming on who will not receive insurance. So we're looking at around 291 if that is voted on by the board, the full board.
Tracy, can I just interrupt real quick? Just to follow up on Jim's point, there will be no reduction in hours of service at the library, correct?
Same headcount, less than.
Right, and same hours of service being provided to the community.
Yes.
Yes, okay, it's an important note, so.
That wasn't your question?
So you answered my question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're.
I'm just making the point that we are you're reconfiguring things and providing the same level of service that you were currently providing for less money.
For less money, and we're actually adding an hour on Saturdays. So in January, our Saturday hours will change from 9 to 2 to 10 to 4. So we're providing more services.
Right.
But you weren't asking about hours. You were talking about staff. Yeah. Okay.
So you'll have the same number of bodies, but you'll have slightly less in terms of full-time equivalents.
Exactly. And full-time for us is 30 hours. So we'll be hiring a part-time circulation services coordinator at around 20 to 25 hours per week. But again, this all has to be voted on by the board. So the insurance is reduced, and so some of our hours have been reworked, and the numbers aren't final because of this board approval that we need. And we are also still waiting on some of the insurance numbers. I need to talk to Martin about that, but in total, the increase in our budget is a little coming in around 2,000 over last year's budget. Does that make sense? Okay.
Are there any questions right now? So the changes that you're gonna see in this budget have only to do with staffing and insurance and nothing else at this time.
The building portion that's under your.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The building itself is the town's, our maintenance problem.
The maintenance, yes. Yes, the maintenance.
Yes.
Got any comments?
No. Last time I was here, we talked, I came and talked to you guys about the library. You guys all had just a brief conversation about wage parity and town staff. We have part of the process of realizing, when we had personnel depart, we realized there was a chance to reconfigure and think about wage parity more. It's been really helpful to work with John on that. I personally haven't done that, but Dan, it's good he's been in here speaking with John. It's been a nice opportunity.
Good. I think we're all shaking our heads at this point.
I think that might have been what showed us.
Right.
We didn't set a very high bar.
I think the key is don't have a requirement for a few 10-wheel trucks that take a year and a half to order that come with a really big price tag. Okay, thank you.
Tracy. Thanks, Becca.
Yeah,
So next up, John with the rec center. So again,
what you're looking at.
yep. So John's budget starts on page 6 of your budget. Oh, you want a copy? Sorry.
Yours, I think of the same way mine did.
It's also
Page starts like this.
It's also important to note that with the rec center, John, it's probably helpful to also review the revenue first, because you have an increase in revenue this year.
Yes, so our revenues continue to grow, and I anticipate we're on pace this year to grow again at a steady increase.
Where's the revenue?
So real quick, John, just unnumbered page. It is page 5 in the budget packet. It's the 5th page. While you're all getting there, there was a request online to have the library driveway graded and stoned. So just so we are clear, I will make that note.
Yeah, and we know we were hoping to have that done from
Yes.
the Merck grant. Okay, we're looking at the revenue now.
Yes, we're looking at rec center revenue.
Okay. So the actual revenue from 2024 was 182,000. The big drivers for that are the after-school program and summer camp. As much as I want to be recreation, that's we're using this as daycare, childcare in a sense. The need is there to provide service to the community, but that's also our best revenue source. Youth programs have continued to grow, and the youth programs come with the expenses. So when we bring the group to the aquatic center, to Vin's, to the bowling alley, to the new rock climbing gym, the more kids we have, we pay a fee to them as well, but we more than cover our costs. So I anticipate us to continue to grow in terms of revenue. We're slightly ahead of last year's pace for this year, so that's the good news. So the more we provide, the more costs we have, but we've seen to keep our over-under operations costs right around the same. I think it was just over $100,000 to operate the rec center this last fiscal year. In addition to that, we also received a stipend from the Covered Bridges Half Marathon. I sit on the board for that. A few meetings a year, and then about 1 week of putting in some time, getting ready for the race, and one long Sunday. This past year, Covered Bridges Half Marathon gave us a stipend of $17,600 for our services. which comes in great for all of our projects.
Do you see any changes with the change of the executive race director there? I mean, you mentioned a board, so the boards still would be basically doing this great service of, using rec programs as volunteers, and then in turn, a nice donation. But I know there's a change in leadership, so I didn't know if there's anything in the winds.
Nothing in the ones that we know of. I was just sent an email asking to confirm as they were posting our mission statements along with on their page and getting ready to launch that.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't foresee any changes because they rely on us, Hartford, and the Woodstock Rec Center, and there's not been much turnover in any of those recreation departments, so we all know our roles. And, so, not been notified of anything yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Any questions on revenue? In terms of expenses, there's really nothing new. It's just inflation. I think the big driver for us is part-time salaries, and health insurance costs. And then when you look at the increased cost of programs, the more we provide, the more it costs us, but then we have the revenue to go along with it as well.
The big jump in health insurance, if you're looking through their line by line, the assistant rec director is now going on the town's insurance, who was not previously being covered.
Aged out of
right.
Hopping on mom and dad.
So that's driving that $18,000 jump in health insurance there.
So with that, you get about a 10% increase. Without that, you're probably closer to 5%.
Correct. Which is that kind of the 4% inflation number that we were working with. Anything else, John?
I didn't highlight anything myself. I was looking through this today.
Everything's pretty close.
Right. Some of the health insurance is the big one at the rec. Some of the bigger jumps again were those things that we can't control. Green Mountain Power, things like that. They're going up, 4 to 5%. The website charges, those are just, costs that we have to bear to provide these services. So,
John, under, with the vans, we have 2 line items. One is the maintenance and the other is, I assume, a reserve fund to build.
To replace. Straight in.
Just with the cost of things, are those numbers, are they going to hold up?
We seem to be coming in pretty true with the maintenance. We had a little bit of some rotor and brake work on one of the vans, which is typical of any vehicle you drive in Vermont. More would hope. There's not a lot of passenger vans that come around very often.
No, we're okay, because we usually go about 10 years before John replaces his vans. So 4,500 gets $45,000. And each of these vans were a year old. So we bought one in 19 and one in 20, and they were $33,700.
But the fund that this money is going into, is it the same as the highway equipment fund or separate?
Yes, it is.
One equipment.
one equipment fund.
All right, so
Our vans are
so you don't have
currently,
any money.
yeah, our vans are currently in 2018 and in 2019. Yeah, the toughest thing the vans went through was the COVID and the not being driven. I mean, that's the worst thing for any vehicle.
But I mean, it does raise a question. You guys can decide what you want to do. Should it be carved out?
Yes, yeah. One of the things that has been kind of talked about a little bit is finding covered parking for them over the winter, so they're not sitting out there exposed to elements. I think some of the rust and brake damage and rotors that you guys had to do this year is probably related to just sitting outside all year long.
How about is there room in the barn?
There's not currently room in the barn.
Okay.
No.
Just out of curiosity, what's in there?
Just a side note, I came through Chester yesterday, and that their fire department, they got one of those bow type structures that I guess for the firemen to park under, so they don't have to go out.
Right. That was actually where I was thinking something like
There's one on the Brownsville Road.
yeah, something like that. Something cheap like that. To answer your question, what's in the barn right now? I mean, the chipper's in there. The school has a lot of like boiler equipment in there. We did create a lot of space by getting rid of the holder, which freed up a lot of space, but there's still, the tent that it gets rolled up and stored in there.
The wood chipper takes the space where you could potentially park the vans because the way the door is open, you couldn't really get a vehicle over into the right side of it from the door open. So the wood chipper kind of takes the parking space that would be available in the essentially.
Somebody else's problem to do it.
Are there any questions online?
No questions online.
Okay. Any questions? Good. John, thank you.
Thank you.
We need to address budget as a whole. And I certainly am going through it today. I found myself just circling and questioning some items. But I don't think we're ready to do that this evening, but we did kick around when. And we want to have this done by January at the latest.
So I would like to set aside essentially all of the next meeting as to finalize the budget. So that's the 16th.
We need to maybe talk about articles for town.
Correct. So not having any other business, my plan was the 16th to do the budget and at least at this point draft articles for town meeting, which we can finalize in early January if needed.
But to draft articles, we kind of have to have a decision on whether we want to suggest a bond for Quechee.
Yeah, there's correct.
Exactly.
I'm like, yes, we have to do that.
School.
Well, and then there's the Bird Hill, and there's a lot of.
Yeah, Bird Hill's kind of on us.
Not an article necessarily.
Yeah, no, not an article, but I'm just saying future agenda items, we have that. But I think the big one is the overall budget, and the articles that could arise from that.
But as long as we're on future agenda items, can we just make sure cemeteries and capital plan get back on the running list so we don't drop them?
Yes.
80 Mill Street as well, kind of a follow-up discussion on possible solutions.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, then we're going on to the town manager update.
Great. Short, because it was a pretty short break in between with the holiday. So you'll notice that the work was all done both at the rec center, and they completed the work at Damon Hall last week. Monday, they finished up some touch-up work. They seeded, they threw some straw down. They did the detectable warning plates on the new sidewalk that was required to close out the Three Corners grant. It's still currently covered with plastic, just given the weather. They're going to come down probably Wednesday this week to pull that off. That'll be done. They will likely be back in spring, recognizing that not much is going to germinate from the grass seed they threw down in November. We are having Brookfield Service coming tomorrow to give us a quote for the generator at Damon Hall. We talked about this a few meetings ago. As the emergency operations center for the town, it would behoove us to have backup power. So Brookfield Service has the generator at the highway garage and fire station. They provide annual service on that. So they're going to give us a quote on that, and we will move forward with that grant application from there.
And this is a generator that is connected right into the breaker box.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, it will be. We got an update from the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, who put in the Providence Garden over at the library this summer. They did some soil testing, everything, it seems fairly normal. Most of their data will come at the end of next year, at the end of next growing season. This was just really prep work for next year. So they're still working on some of the outreach materials and signage for that garden as well.
John, they also mentioned that maybe not relevant given that it's the 2nd of December and it's rather cold, but they have spare plants left over from, so as a public, if anyone out there is looking for some plants and as a way to bring them through the winter,
yes,
let us know.
We are moving forward with having both Damon Hall and the Rec Center tested for lead paint. We've heard rumors that there's lead paint in both buildings, and it would seem likely that there is. So we're getting a quote for what that would cost us, so that we can have that, we can budget for that and have that mitigated. So we'll see what, hopefully it all comes back negative, but I would not anticipate that.
So is there a requirement that we test?
There's not a requirement that we test. I think we owe it to the employees who are in these buildings on a daily basis for their safety to have the building tested for lead paint.
But lead exposure generally comes from chewing on windowsills or
correct.
Windows are painted with paint.
There are areas in both structures where the lead paint is flaking and chipping from the walls or ceilings. So it is, right, you're correct. If everything was painted smoothly and fine, it would not be an issue, but that is not the case. We had an HVAC company come last week to give us a quote for the heat pump that the Historical Society had requested to help mitigate moisture in the basement, particularly during the summer months where they are there, especially July and August. It sounds like they're there on a daily basis, emptying the dehumidifiers that are running to keep everything dry down there. The quote came back for just the mini split, not the electrical work, at $6,385. So $6,385. That's to put it on the back side of the building, so there's not an issue of snow or ice landing on it. It can be reduced a little bit if we put it on the side of the building, but then we would need to, they would strongly encourage you to build some sort of roof over it. And that price does account for the efficiency rebate of $425.
At that cost, we should look for a second quote.
Sure. Yep. This was just to keep the conversation moving.
Yeah. No, thank you for doing that. And there's a need for it, for sure.
Yeah. And then lastly, I just want to, in the meeting, commend the road crew, who many of them gave up most of their Thanksgiving Day to plow and keep the roads clear, or to the best of their ability. So,
yeah. No.
I'll say, from my own perspective, I thought the roads are in pretty good shape, and even the summer and fall work.
Yeah. Good. Good.
And I can sure tell that seasons change with the dust on the back of my car. Just one or two freezing nights.
Yes. So that is it.
One thought on the budget discussion for next week. So we've got lots of budgets here. We've got the general fund, of which library and rec center are a part. And then we've got the highway fund, right? But we don't have at least I don't recall seeing the bottom line, punch line. Like, what's the total of all our budgets increase year over year?
Sure. I mean, we can talk about that now if you want to.
I think it's just important to know because general I think is going up 9% or so. Right, highway is only going up about 2%.
It's about just under. That's correct.
And some of that's because things have moved back and forth, right? And then library sounds like it's going up about 1 or 2%,
if that.
So our total, in terms of tax increase, might be like 5 or 6%.
I would anticipate somewhere in the 4 to 5% range,
which is a lot easier to swallow than an 8 or 9%.
Correct. That does not account for any potential bond, though. Right.
Bond
Okay.
is separate. You have to phrase that separate.
Martin?
So your new budget that you got out, I believe the general fund is down to 8.6 or 8.5. If Tracy drops her budget by $16,000, that should drop that down to around 8.3 maybe. So the one with the yellow line on the right is the increase on the general fund. I think we've got that down to 8.65. I can't remember off the top of my head.
And Howie's at 1.5.
And the highway is, yes, the highway kind of stayed even with the increase in the equipment fund and the increase in the paving. The biggest driver in the highway fund going down is 1 million less.
What? Right, we took a position from the highway and we moved a position, buildings and grounds into the town side.
Correct.
So if you balance those two things out, you're right, we're in that
4 to 5.
4 to 5% range.
Yeah, so, but
Yeah, and
that's a pretty good story.
We have worked diligently, all the departments have worked very diligently to keep that and to work with that like inflation number and keep the budget there.
Yeah, and Jim, does that help with your?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what it dawned on me today is it's not as bad as 8.5%.
It is not as bad as 8.5%.
There's a better story here to be told.
Yes.
I mean, when we get into the discussion of the whole, I mean, one of the types of questions I have is, are we shooting ourselves in the leg by not having any ordinance administrator monies in here, especially when there's a possibility of shared services, and what would those shared services cost?
I would say keep it in.
Yeah.
So
It's not in there.
It's not in there now. We did take it out because it had been not used for the past few years, so we were carrying unspent money over. And we can talk about it. We could talk about it in more detail. Absolutely.
Sounds good. And
Trace?
as I said, oh, I'm sorry, did you?
It's okay, you go ahead.
Well, I just mentioned at the top of the meeting that I saw an email from that Vermont Digger put out today that the school property education tax was a minimum of 5.9% this year. So I don't know what impact that will have with our school, but it's not as bad as it was last year. It's
carrying over, certainly.
So you mentioned that there was an open position for the road crew.
So
You're not filling it?
correct.
Does the road crew know that?
Yes, they do.
They do.
The road foreman is now a working foreman position.
See?
So, yep.
So they are all understanding that that position is not going to get filled.
They are understanding that the position is not going to get filled. We're figuring out what that means on an operational basis day to day.
Okay. Martin, did you have another comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any comments online?
No comments online.
Okay. Correspondence?
No correspondence. I do want to go back to future agenda items. So we have the budget and the draft articles. So with the holidays, we have the 16th of December. There had been talk at the previous meeting about the 30th. Given holiday travel, I would like to not meet the 30th if at all possible. I will not be in the state.
I think we just got to back into it. So like you've got to develop a town report. You got to go to the publisher. You have to have a warning with the articles and everything out to the public, right? So I think we just need to back into when we reasonably need to have this done, so we're not creating chaos.
Right. I think reasonably speaking, the budget can be done at the next meeting.
Okay.
And I think what we're saying is if we get those drop dead dates, then we know if we can
Well,
step it to the next.
if everybody gets their darn reports in on time, we shouldn't have to send out that flyer because we can have the town report out in time.
Right. And we're fortunate that the first meeting in January is early. So the first meeting in January is the second, I believe. No, not January, the 6th. Because Wednesday's the 1st.
So we wouldn't have to mail the warning?
If you can get your town report out enough days, you have to put out the warning 30 days ahead.
Right.
But you don't, all you have to do is post it. You don't have to mail it.
Oh, okay.
And then you get the town report out with the warning in it and everything else, at least
Right.
10 days prior to town meeting. You don't have to have the expense of sending out that 8-page flyer.
Okay. All right.
Means that when
I thought
you
we had
say,
to mail that.
when Michelle says she wants it by this date, if it's not there, you do not publish that report in the town report. Because we've done that before too.
Right.
Yeah. Just do that.
Yeah, I am just worried about just our correspondence to the town, that we're clear about what we're going to have, and if there's been an expectation that the blue flyer is coming with the warrants.
People are more likely to read a shorter document.
Yeah.
Well, we've dropped other things before. We had,
No, I understand that.
It would, yeah, the optics wouldn't be good if we didn't send it and then we say, give us $4 million.
Okay, so we wandered into a lot of different things there. Are you saying no correspondence?
There's no correspondence.
Okay. So we do have, a Mayor Campbell request, so we do need to enter into an executive session.
I think I can do this. What time is 7:52?
6.
7.
I have 6:50.
I thought you meant 7:56.
I was like,
No, you
no.
are correct. 6. You're right. It's always.
I got confused. I didn't change my.
Right, I'm not-
from Colorado.
I'm not that hungry yet. I can't.
This is Clark. So the reason why, and we have done, we are.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Okay. I just wanted to say the reason why I mentioned the fact that the school system might have is because the rec center wasn't the rec.
You can.
It was all the town school system that ran all athletics.
Yes.
No rec department.
So I don't lose it.
Any manipulation that was done physically out here with the library, all of that documentation should have been kept by the school system, in my mind. So it might be there, if you can't find it here.
But if she was asking for kind of that, those
Like
planning documents.
Futuristically planning documents that with groups like the policing department put together. And
See, I didn't mention, we had a police committee years ago. I didn't even mention that, 'cause I figured you could find those.
Well, and that's what triggered my sort of said, where is that report that everyone talks about? And we never found it.
And are they looking for more money before the budget issue? So please, are they?
But I think we just need.
No. So Reese, just so you were clear, there is an action. There will be action taken.
Yeah, we actually haven't made our motion yet.
No, we've not.
Executive session.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna make a motion to enter executive session under 1 VSA 313A6 to discuss American Campbell request.
I'll second the motion.
That's good, because your name is already here.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
to satisfy a recent request.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trace. All in favor, say aye. 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 Motion passes.